Hi, Algebra 3 students. You are getting close to finishing this note packet. We're going to look at stretches and shrinks. And so let's get started. Have your note packet out in front of you. And let's take a look at what we're going to be doing. So we're going to be looking at shrinks and stretches. And we're going to be looking at first notes, part 1. And so you need to, let's see if I can actually get this here for you guys. Okay, we're going to be looking at shrinks and stretches of parent functions, and we're going to look at part 1. So have your note packet out in front of you, and it is this shrinks and stretches. Everything is going to be the same. We're going to start with the parent function, and then in another color, you're going to graph the new function. Okay, so everything so far is the same as all the other notes. Very first thing I want you to do is you need to start graphing the parent functions. I know this is I know the parent functions. Keep doing it. Why? It's going to pay off. So how do we know what the parent function is? Well, we know because of the squared right here. That squared value means I have a quadratic family, and I know that my quadratic family starts at 0, 0. My critical points are at 1, 1, and negative 1, 1. Ooh. And here we go. You guys know me and my awesome drawings here. I'm doing the big fat marker because it's easier for me to use. Okay. It's the U. It looks something like that. Pause the video here, and I want you to draw in the parent function with its critical points on the next 2. Okay, welcome back. So your notes should look like this. You can see I have drawn in all the parent functions and all those critical points, okay? But we're not looking at just parent functions anymore. We're going to try something new. And so right here, we now have this multiply by 2, multiply by 3, and multiply by 5 on the outside of our grouping symbols. So what does that mean? Okay, it's time to head to Desmos, everybody. So head to desmos.com, hit on graphing or start graphing, and you should be at a page that looks like this. Okay, so our first one is, let's see, y equals 2x squared. And I'm going to zoom that out, I'm going to zoom that in so I can see those nice critical points. Take a look at what happened. That vertex did not move, but my critical point is now I went up 2 over 1 to get to that next critical point. Okay, interesting. And I'm going to go ahead and type these in, and then I'm going to have you draw them in. So you can pause the video here, draw in this parent function, okay, or that has been transformed or moved or shifted or shrunk. Okay, so put in those critical points. Vertex at 0, 0, and then I had to go up 2 to the right one to get to that next critical point. Okay, the next one that we're going to look at is 3 square root SQRT x. Looks like the swoosh, but what happened? Our starting point is still down here at 0, 0. But where's my next nice point? 1, I had to go up 1, 2, 3 over 1 to get to that nice point. So I'm going to the right one up 3 to get to that. Okay. Remember, pause the video here, put this into your notes, see what happens. Okay, let's take a look here. Y equal 5 absolute value of x. Ooh. So 0, 0 still hanging out there, but I no longer went up and to the right to that next. I had to go all the way up to 5 and over 1 to get to that nice lattice point. So let's go back to the notes. And let me see if I can find them. And your notes should now look like this. All right, I have new functions. And I want you to take a look at what happened to those critical points. That's why we ask you to put in those critical points on the parent function. So when we do a shrink or a stretch, we know you know what you're doing. So everything was kind of squeezed into that y-axis, okay? And let's look at the conclusion, okay? Let's just focus on that quadratic for right now. When you have something that is multiplying the parent function, so we're like right here, guys. Let me do spotlight. Okay, we're right here. We have that 2 times that parent function of x squared. We shrunk or we squeezed that parent function towards the y-axis. Sometimes people argue if it's a shrink or a stretch. You're going to hear me call it a shrink, but it really means it's been squeezed or it gets closer to the y-axis. So how does that change the domain? Okay, can I still plug in any x and get a y? Yeah. So our domain hasn't changed. It's still all real numbers, that funky R. And what about the range? Okay. What does happen to the range? Am I going to be able to get any y that I want? Well, no, I never have any y's down here in the negative, so my range is still going to be, okay, my range is still going to be from negative infinity to, oh, sorry, not negative infinity. It goes from 0 to positive infinity. It's just like the parent function. It never is negative. It never drops below that x-axis. So what I want you guys to think about is what happens to those other 2 graphs. Okay, what are the domain and range for those other 2 graphs? Okay. All right. We're going to go on to part 2. Stop the video here if you need to finish up anything with part 1. Pause and we will continue. Let me get my notes ready. All right. Let's take a look at part 2. Okay, make sure you have that conclusion done. All right, part 2, I want you to go ahead and put in the parent functions. You guys know what the parent functions look like. Pause the video here, write in your parent functions, and then we'll move on. Okay. Again, we're not interested in what those parent functions look like. We know what they look like. What you need to focus on is, well, now I have this weird thing with a division sign. How is that going to change my graph? Take a minute and make a prediction. I predict this will happen. All right, go back to Desmos. Stop your video here or keep it going and have your Desmos open. And we'll take a look here. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to delete all of these because we know what happens when you multiply. So let's just get rid of these guys. Okay, our first one is y equals the square root of x divided by 2. Now look at that divide by 2. That divide by 2 is inside the grouping symbol, meaning it's inside the square root, which makes a difference. So, our starting point is the same, but let's look at what happens to the nice next point. I went up 1 and to the right 2. So I'm at the point 2, 1 now. Okay, it used to be 1, 1, but now it's moved over. If we look even for the next nice point, the next nice point is like at 8, 2. So I had to come all the way over to 8 and up to 2 to get to that nice next point. Okay, but it's really this first critical point I'm looking at. Okay, I went to the right 2, or I went up 1 to the right 2. Okay, let's take a look at what happens to the next graph. y equals the absolute value of x divided by 5. Holy moly, look at what happened to that thing. Still started at 0, 0, but now I had to go up 1 to the right 5. My next nice point is right there. Oh, I had it. 5, 1. That's my next nice point. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to have you pause the video here, put these into the graph, and I want you to think about that last one. Okay. Stop share. We'll do this. Let me get back to the notes. Okay, here are these. So those are what the first two look like. We already talked about those. I want you to do the third one on your own. As a point of just clarification, because the absolute value is basically linear, okay, you might also see this written as 1/5 times the absolute value of x, and it's going to be the same. Now with these others two, these aren't linear, the quadratic and the square root family, so the numbers are going to be divided on the inside. I just want you to be aware of that. Your homework here might have some of this 1/5 times the square root, or sorry, 1/5 times the absolute value of x. These two things mean it'll give you the same graph. Try it in Desmos and see if it works. If it doesn't, come talk to me and tell me I was wrong, okay? I've been wrong. It's okay to tell me, Mrs. Taufa, you messed up big time in that video. All right, make sure you have the third one done. Conclusion, guys. I don't want this. Let me get rid of my 1/5 x here. Clear all drawings. Okay, conclusions. I want you to write your own conclusion. And if you're having a hard time writing a conclusion, just answer this question. What happens when the parent function is divided by a number or multiplied by a fraction? Means the same thing. But what happens when you divide by a number and that number's on the inside of the grouping symbol? What did it do to the graph? Did it widen the graph? Did it squeeze it towards a different axis? Okay, you tell me what happened. I also want you guys to think about, okay, domain and range. Describe the domain and range for all of these. Can you put any x in and get any y back out? Okay, tell me those questions, answer those questions when you give a conclusion. All right, you guys now have just one more piece. Make sure you do the daily practice for this one. It's the daily practice number 3. It'll help you really get reflections and shrinks and stretches. And you're almost done with this note packet. Thanks, Algebra 3. We'll see you in class.